get started. Good morning, Kyle. Welcome
Good
to
morning.
welcome to Waypoint Coffee Corner. Again, you're one of our regulars, as you are one of our Waypoint leaders. uh,
Yeah.
for those who are here, Waypoint Coffee Corner is a ministry of or a part of Waypoint Youth Outreach, which is a youth ministry of La Mesa Village Church. We are excited this morning to discuss some topics and introduce some topics to the conversation, and I'm excited for it. But first off, Kyle, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Um, Not very tired, so that's nice.
Nice, nice, nice. Well, do you have any plans for today for this Saturday?
Watch Eliana, so
All
that'll be
right,
fun.
all
Yeah.
right. Uh, for those who don't know, Eliana is my niece, but Kyle lives with my brother and sister-in-law, and I guess they're working today. So,
Yep.
um,
Just
excellent,
as far as I know.
excellent. So, hello, everybody in chat. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Tell your friends. Get your friends here as well. I'm going to be having to adjust some audio things as we go throughout the day. My headset and my microphone and all that type of stuff wasn't really working, so I had to pull some audibles on some things, on some audio audibles. There we go. Say that 10 times fast. Uh, but anyway, today we are actually starting kind of a new chapter of Waypoint Coffee Corner. We are. It's not that we're gonna stop having interviews and stop doing things, but we're also going to be discussing topics and topics that are important for the Christian to understand. Um, this is important for believers, and it's going to be a little difficult. There are some things that make your head spin, but I am glad that we're going to be able to do it. Um, Today we are going to be talking about logic, reasoning or reason, and epistemology. It's a big long word. Epistemology. And we're going to be talking about this topic because it is so important to be able to apply logic and reason to the things that we know. And epistemology being a really fancy word for like what we can know. We'll get more to that in a second. Um, but the goal of this and the goal of this podcast and the goal of all the coffee corners is to equip the church, is to equip the waypointers, is to equip La Mesa Village Church, and equip those who are outside listening in on YouTube or on Twitch live when we're here. There's going to be questions. I encourage you guys to engage, be an active listener, process through some of this stuff, and we'll continue to talk about logic, reason, and epistemology. It's one thing to note is that this is an intro. There are whole doctorate degrees dedicated to this world of logic and reason and epistemology and frankly philosophy and thinking well. So there is no way that we are going to fully and comprehensively dive into it today. But what we do want to do is we want to get people's toes wet a little bit, and we want to spend some time talking about these things and sorting things out, of, and at least getting people to and getting you guys to think more about it. So, um, I'm going to kick it over to Kyle real quick. Kyle, why is logic, reasoning, and epistemology, why are these things important to you?
They're important to me because without them, you can really quickly fall into some really weird beliefs, really weird uh, like thought processes and things that just lead you down the wrong path. You can end up believing, really easily, pretty much what anyone will like. Without them, you'll kind of start to believe what anyone tells you if it agrees with what you already believe, and or even if it just sounds good to you, you'll believe it. and that's really problematic.
It really is. I mean, it's this. It. Whoa. Huh.
So,
That cup just flipped outside my on my patio. That's weird. Anyway. Uh.
good. Without logic, epistemology, or reason, I would say it was an alien. So there we go.
Without logic, epistemology, or reason, it was an alien.
Yep.
Basically, the thing that we want to use, right, is ultimately, when it comes to logic and reasoning and epistemology, is it's a part of critical thinking. It is a part of testing what we believe, right? And testing knowledge. And again, I'm just kind of introing the topic, but frankly, there are things that we like and we dislike, right? There are things that we are naturally inclined to, and there are things that we are not naturally inclined to, right? We want to be careful when we're doing these things, and when we have certain beliefs, that these things, that we're able to differentiate what is truth, what is well reasoned truth, and what are some of these things that might be irrational beliefs or rational beliefs that we hold to. There's incredibly there are irrational beliefs that we hold to. If I go in the ocean, I will die from a shark attack. Right? Well, that could be one. If I go into the ocean, I will die of a shark attack. If I get in an airplane, I will die of an airplane crash. Right? And that is a belief that people can hold to, and that's a really plain belief that people can hold to. In that it can affect how we deal with truth. It can affect how we intake new information, right? And I think that it's so important, especially today, as we navigate difficult topics, as we navigate uh, all the new information that we receive. Frankly, we should be in a constant state of growing, and we should be in a constant state of growth in our lives and our beliefs, and what we believe. I'm going to make a a conclusion statement without doing the premises, which is funny because we're going to talk about logic here in a second. But the conclusion statement is that there are some things that we should believe, and there are some things that are irrational to believe, and we want to be able to navigate through those things well. So, again, I spent years studying this. There are whole doctorate degrees. There are whole schools of thought. You could go to one school for a doctorate degree that is going to be very, very, very different than another school's doctorate degree. And the reason why is because there's different focuses, there's different things, and honestly, the topics are, some of them are moving. And what I want us to recognize is some of these topics, like epistemology, for example, our understanding of them is dynamic. It moves. And what's important is to understand is that they need to move in such a way that it makes sense, that it is logical and reasonable to move, and this is important, and this should happen in our own lives too. This should happen. Our beliefs that we hold to are far more dynamic than we realize, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So, Kyle, you got anything else like for the intro before we start talking about logic?
No, you covered it pretty well. I can't think of anything to add.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, we have a little show doc here that we're going to be working through and kind of going through things and just going with it. So first, we're going to talk about logic. Oh my goodness, logic, logic, logic. Kyle, what would you say logic is?
Um, it is the applying of reason to come to a good conclusion, but adheres to uh, a set of rules or principles that guide you to that conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the correct reasoning, right?
Yeah,
It's proper, right?
exactly.
Uh it's one thing we have to recognize, and we're not going to get into it again. This is to dip your toes into it. Is that there are rules to logic,
Yeah,
right? And when I say rules, I mean like there are absolute rules to logic, right? They're immovable,
absolute laws.
right? Of and when we are working through these, the thing is that there are good ways to work through our logic, and there are bad ways that are illogical, right, to work through them. So there's a couple things that I think are important here um, when we are working through these and when we're thinking about logic. It's this is where you'll hear a lot of premises and conclusions, right? Logic started off philosophically, and then it started moving into other realms of thinking because it is so universal, right, in its application. You'll hear logic, the term logic thrown around. uh,
There we go.
you'll hear the term logic thrown around in math settings, right?
It's the basis of math.
Right. It's when you have to prove something, you use logic to prove it. If you guys
Yep.
remember, I mean, I don't know who and what was taught, but I remember, I'll say, somewhere around middle school, in my math books, I had to do geometric proofs, and you have to logically work through those geometric proofs,
Yeah.
right? To say something is a right angle, right? You have to work through the logic to get to the point of saying it's a right angle, right? Or something like that.
No, yeah, that's exactly it. Like in math, you have proofs like starting in geometry, where you have to prove something to be true conclusively, and it can't just be I feel that it's true, right? Or it looks true,
Right.
but you
I
have
look at it and it has all the features that I see of a 90-degree angle.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's not enough.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting about logic is it's in the business of proving things, right?
Hmm.
So, um, what might be an example of good logic?
Um, and I think an easy example would be Enzo is a dog. All dogs are mammals. Then, or if all dogs are mammals, then Enzo must be a mammal.
Right. Or therefore Enzo is a
Or
mammal,
therefore, yeah.
right? This is a good example of formal logic, right? For example, you can just say black widows have 8 legs, right?
Yep.
But to logically prove there, you have to have factual things, right? Actual facts that you can build that off of. So, for example, all spiders have 8 legs. Black widows are a type of spider. Black widows have 8 legs, right?
Yeah.
This is the logical reasoning, right? And there are so many things when it comes to logic that we need to recognize are part of the conversation, right? Again, this isn't exhaustive, but those were examples of formal logic. There are informal logic, right? Uh, and informal logic is when you use logic in such a way to come to conclusions that are poor, basically. They are not good conclusions. So like you can logically work through something
Yeah.
that like makes
I
sense, but you can arrive at an absurd conclusion with the poor application of logic.
Well, yeah, informal logic is logic that can't be put into a form, such as formal
Literally
logic,
informal.
formalized. Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? Because I know when we were talking about this, you
um,
wanted to bring up a point about the difference between informal logic and bad logic.
yeah. I mean, so informal logic is so formal logic can be put into a form such as if P then Q, right? Um,
If premise,
if
then conclusion.
like
Sorry.
exactly, yeah, or premise, argument, conclusion, like something like that. Whereas informal logic doesn't have that. It often will have implied premises, possibly implied arguments, or something along those lines, where you can't put it into a form of if P then Q or something along those lines, and so it's not formalized. Um, it can lead to bad conclusions.
Right. And an example of that is when you have like bad premises to start with, when you
Hmm.
have of when you don't start with and have a starting place of facts, right?
Or I mean, you have like premises that are good, but you have a hidden premise in there that you don't state that is bad,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. So, an example of informal logic would be Nikki saw a black cat on her way to work. At work, Nikki got fired. Black cats are bad luck. This is bad because it's a big generalization, right? It it's you can't verify it, and there's hidden premises, right? One of them is that uh, black cats uh, are the only thing that she saw on her way to work. As if another hidden premise would be that the things you see on your way to work determine how your work goes, right? This is informal. This arrives at bad conclusions. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that when we're talking about logic specifically, is that we can arrive at bad conclusions, and we have to even then test conclusions, right? And we have to test like what is going on around us, right? So an example might be, and maybe one that is helpful for today, is and these would be examples of bad logic, right? Or uh, you can't get rich without being greedy. Greed is bad, therefore all rich people are greedy. I'm sorry, all rich people are bad. My bad.
Yeah.
Right? This is bad because this is a huge generalization. You can't verify it. There are plenty of people who get rich who do it ethically, right? And
Well,
do
and
it by taking care of people and being good about it.
yeah, and it also starts on a bad premise as well, right?
Right.
Like, in order to get rich, you have to be greedy.
Right. And that's just something that we have to like instantly start with and be like, wait a second, like this is a rough place to start with. I don't know if I can even agree with the premise at the beginning, so therefore we shouldn't move forward through the end, right? So another example of this might be another example of uh, difficult things to work through that may have logic and may not, but may not be good, right? Is uh, Kyle said that I'm colorblind. Because I'm colorblind, I can't trust my eyes. Kyle said I can't trust my eyes.
Okay.
It's silly. It's absurd,
Yeah.
right? But some of these premises are really bad, right? And they might logically continue in a certain way, but like Kyle never said I can't trust my eyes. Kyle said, according to the premise, that I'm colorblind. There's problems here. Is Kyle an optometrist? Has he tested my eyes? Right? Like, the answer is no. It's a bad premise to start with. But let's pretend Kyle was an optometrist and that he did test my eyes. It would still be a bad conclusion because it, while it might have some forms or things that look like logic in it, it wraps in a bunch of different premises to arrive at a conclusion that we don't recognize. It's, again, we're not going to spend all day talking about logic and the difficulties of it. Kyle, can you think of anything? Um, do you have anything else that you want to say about logic? Because we're just introing the topics today.
I mean, I think the final thing I'll say about logic is that if given a good starting point, it will always lead to a good conclusion. Um, that's the beauty of logic, is that it works out perfectly as long as applied correctly.
Yeah, and logic, because of the nature of it, it works from a place of absolutes, right?
Yes.
It works from a place of, or I should say this: logic wants to operate from a place of that, like, you can't argue a specific little point, right? It's like absolutely true, right? Right angles are 90 degrees.
It's like math where you know 2 plus 2 is 4. You can't really argue otherwise,
Right.
right?
And it's so, like, logic is moving through those things logically, right? But I don't want to use the same word, right? It's the correct movement through reasoning, right? To arrive at conclusions. What I should say is that people are using logic all the time, right? The problem is whether or not they're using good logic all the time, and that's
Yeah.
so, like, again, because you can have bad logic that follows bad conclusions, right? Uh, Kyle or Mike was at the grocery store when there was a robbery. Mike, uh, Mike's family isn't rich, therefore Mike was one of the robbers, right? Like,
Yeah.
that sounds super absurd, right? But there's so much stuff that's, like, wrapped up in that. This is really important because what we see and what we see in the, I don't want to use the big M word, right? The media, right? But, like, we see these types of things when it comes to conspiracy theories, when it comes to people pushing agenda. That's something else we should say about logic, is that logic is agendaless, right? Like, it's not trying to convince you of something. It's not.
Yeah.
It's just these are the facts, and this is how you move through things well.
It's a set of rules. Yeah.
And I think that we're actually kind of blending in and moving towards the application of logic, right? Which is the next point: reason, right? And reason has a lot of different connotations to it, but it is reasoning is uh the capacity for logical, rational, and analytical thought. It's intelligence, right? It's using logic in a good way to arrive at good conclusions that you have a reason for, right? Or that you've reasoned to. Can you think of anything that? So Kyle, what do you think about this? Like, what are your thoughts on reason and reasoning?
Um, I mean, as far as what it is.
Yeah, like what it is, or do you have any
Yeah.
examples of it?
Uh, Examples, not really. As far as what it is, um, you kind of took my definition. So
Oh no.
yeah, um, it's fine though. I mean, it was just that, it's
Well,
the
okay, so here's a thing, right? Reason has a lot of uh reason has a lot of definitions. We should
yeah,
recognize that. In the context that we're talking about right here, um reason and reasoning can or cannot be logical, but it is we need to apply logic to good reasoning, right? So we can have like irrational reasons for something. All dogs are bad, right? Well, why do you say dogs are bad? Why do you say dogs are terrible? Well, I got attacked by a dog when I was a kid, right?
yeah.
Okay, you have a reason, right?
That's okay. That's what I was gonna say. It's a justification for a conclusion.
Yeah, right? Like and this is one of those things like reason is different than logic, but reason it uses logic or should use logic. But the thing is in reasoning we can, when it comes to like individual people, we can allow for differences, right? Like we can allow for preferences. Mike, Mike, why didn't you order olives on that pizza? Well, I don't like olives, and I was the one ordering pizza. Okay, like you have a reason for that. I might disagree with your reason. Kyle might love olives, right? Okay. My wife loves olives.
Not even theory. It's
not
gross.
not even close. Get me out. Olives, no go. Olives, negative. If Kyle and
Exactly.
I are ordering pizzas, we will not be ordering olives on our pizza if we have a
Ever,
choice.
ever.
Uh, Unfortunately, you can't get them removed from Costco Supreme Pizza.
That's why you don't get it.
That's why you go pepperoni and sausage. Anyway, so you can have reasons that are highly personal, but what we have to recognize is that we need to have good logic for our reasons to start expanding upon groups of people, right? So your reasons have to get narrower or broader and broader, right? To include groups of people. So for example, Costco. We'll use Costco with pizza. Costco has enough of a reason to put olives on their pizzas, on their supreme pizzas, right? They have enough of a reason. They've reached a threshold. But if a certain number, right, for them, if it reached a certain place where you shouldn't put olives on a pizza, they wouldn't put olives on a pizza. Why? Because they're trying to appeal to a mass group of people. So like as we start applying things broader and broader and broader, our logic has to get sounder and sounder and sounder as we arrive at certain reasons.
It's a really good example. Actually, is business. Like as for the use of reason.
How so?
I mean, like you were saying with olives, there's enough people who like olives on their pizza that Costco has a good reason to put olives on some of their pizza,
Right.
right?
But you know what Costco doesn't have a good enough reason to do? Put olives on every pizza,
Exactly.
right? Because there's enough people who don't like olives to not put olives on every single pizza.
Yeah.
But here's a pretty universal thing, and I mean I know this, but some people disagree with this, but it's when things start becoming the norm, pizza should have three things crust, sauce, and cheese. Right? Like enough people agree on that where that's the default. Right? That is what makes pizza. Right? Mac and cheese needs noodles and cheese. Right? That's universal on its like it's reached a place of broad reaching. So let's move this back into more the philosophical realm and less of the business world. Our reasoning has to be really important, right? If I say, for me, and I'll do it. I'll dip my toes in the water of this one, okay? If I say vaccines are bad and I don't want my children to be vaccinated, right? My reasonings can be more personalized. But if I say you shouldn't vaccinate your children, right? What my reasonings need to be far more logical in their reasoning for me to start making should statements about you.
Your justification for your conclusion needs to be a lot sounder.
Right. So we'll get off the vaccine one because that one's like touching a hand grenade. It's like we are one pin away from exploding. but let's get back to let's go back to sharks in the ocean, right? I go in the ocean, but we're gonna make believe here. If I believe that I'm going to die from a shark attack by going in the ocean, right? And then I don't go in the ocean, right? My reason is justified, it's personal, etc. Right? If I say, Kyle, you shouldn't go in the ocean too because you're going to die of a not heart attack, but of a shark attack, of a shark attack.
That's the water.
Oh.
Oh, there it is.
But if I start saying you should or no one should go in the ocean, right? Because of shark attack, well then my reasoning might not be sound. But here's the thing. Is this is purely looking at reasonings from a personalized perspective. Right? The differences, and this is something that we should have talked about in logic as well, because it's hard to talk about logic without talking about like John 1:1 and Jesus was the word, the logic, the logos, or logos, or logos. There we go.
Logos.
Yeah. But anyway, let's tie this back together. Reasonings for things, right? Like especially for us Christians, should be tied back to God's word, right? I'm reminded of Ephesians where we are where it says we're supposed to submit to one another. What's the reason for that? Right? The reason wasn't because our fellow Christians were super great people or anything like that. No, the reason for that is because of what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross. Right? Like that's the reason we are told to submit to one another. Isn't because of what you've done or what I've done, but because of what Jesus did. And this starts, and one of the core tenets of, and I would say it's the second tenet of being a Christian, but is love the Lord your God with all your heart, right? That gives us plenty of reasons for a lot of things, right? Like avoiding sin, or not avoiding sin, but like running away from sin, having no other gods before God, etc. And then the second is love your neighbor as yourself, right? And that should be enough of a reason for us to highly, highly consider what's best for them, for someone else, right? And what we have to be careful of as Christians is making appeals to reason that not everyone agrees with, right? So we need to make appeals to reason for those who believe the Bible, right? Let's start there, right? Let's start with logic and reason, and we're going to talk about truth here when we get to epistemology in a second. But we need to be very careful about how we apply reason. And we should always, as Christians, be the first to sacrifice our likes or dislikes, or our preferences, right, for following God. I think of Peter in the boat, right? And he walks on water. Like, physics were literally denied, right? Like, but Peter, and being Peter, was like, look, if you're Jesus, then I can walk on water, right? Like, he wasn't saying to the other 11, hey, you should walk on water too, right? But to follow Jesus, we should be so following Jesus that we are defying, so long as we are confident, like, right, so long as we are truly following Jesus, that we are defying, like, our own beliefs. Does that make sense? Maybe you have a better way to word that.
I mean, no, I think you put it well. If we're following, yeah, I'd say that works well.
I've been talking a lot, and I'm self-conscious about it. Can you think of like other ways, like, that we can think about this? Like, we shouldn't obviously just throw out everything, right? All form of logic and reason. Like, we shouldn't be like, hey, I love Jesus, and I think he's telling me to put my finger in this light socket, right? like,
I mean, well, what's funny is even in the explanation of, like, Peter walking on water and defying law, like, having the laws of physics no longer function for him, it's still logic was there, because he was like, if I trust in Jesus and Jesus is who he says he is, then I can walk on water if he calls me to. Right? Like, logic will still sound there.
We should have, how do I say this? We should have a faith that follows Jesus, even if we have a reason to not follow Jesus. Does that make, like, even if if Jesus says, trust me on walking on water, for example, and you say, but you can't walk on water, you need a boat.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
If Jesus says, come and do this thing, come and follow me, then we should go do it. Does that make more sense?
That works, yeah.
Okay, because I think, like, and this is just something for us to be navigating, because, like, there are plenty of times, like, we see this all the time at camp, right? There are some students who are like, I don't want to do this thing, whatever it may be, and we encourage them to get past their reasons of why they don't like a certain thing. So for example, if your reason is, well, I don't want to try new things, I don't want to be out of my comfort zone, well, like, that's the reason why you're at camp, is to be out of your comfort zone, right? If your reason for not playing paintball is because when you have sharp pain, you go into anaphylactic shock, I'm just kind of making some things up, okay, that's a good enough reason personalized for you, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's this give and this take. But one thing that I want all of us Christians to recognize is like we should be the first to lay down our reasons for our neighbor. We should we should be the first to lay down our reasons for God, right? So like for example, if God says, "Hey, don't have sex outside of marriage," right? But God, I really want sex outside of marriage. We should lay down our reasons. We could have reasons why we like sex outside of marriage. We should lay them down for obedience to follow God. Or I won't use coronavirus. Let's say I have a super contagious flu. Okay? And out of loving my neighbor, I really want to. I have a reason why I want to go to the movies with all you guys. Right? I have a reason for that. I want to see the movie. I miss my friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have a really contagious flu. Out of loving for my friends who I was going to go see the movie with, I should not go see the movie. Right? I'm laying down my desires, with my reasons for those desires, to love my neighbors. It's a hyperbolic example, but yeah. So again, as Christians, be ready for that. You might have reasons for something. You might have justified something in your mind, but we need to understand kind of the hierarchy of reasoning, so to speak. And again, as Christians, we lay down our desires for our neighbor, so long as it's reasoned and justified and clear. Anything else on that before we move on to epistemology?
I think just to clarify some things, your personal reasonings for use like sex before marriage, right? The personal reasonings, like the justifications as to why you have that conclusion, are good to lay down for God. And one thing I think to clarify though is those may not be logically sound reasonings, right?
The reasonings that we had
The
to
reasons
disobey God?
you have for premarital sex
Sure.
may not be logically sound, right?
Right.
We aren't advocating like in the face of good logic, just throw logic out the window, right?
Right, because one of the premises that we there are premises, there are logical premises and conclusions that we've arrived to as Christians, like God is good. Right?
Logic, in order for our faith to really work, logic has to remain in place.
Right. So things like God is good.
Yes.
God wants what is good for us. God instructs us, etc.
Yeah.
So,
those are starting points that we have, right?
Right, and those are logically arrived at, and they are both conclusions, and they are premises that we can build other logical conclusions and reasons from.
Yeah.
And
so that's why it's important to make a distinction between logic and reason.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay, cool.
That's all.
I'm glad we touched on that. I think we're going to see how this is important here in a little bit, because especially when it starts getting into the topics that we're dealing with today: racism, politics, COVID, etc. Conspiracy theories. When you start applying these things, and you start applying logic and reason, and you apply them well, that's one of the things that we have to recognize. Like, I can use logic to arrive at some pretty gnarly conclusions, right? That doesn't mean they're the correct conclusions. When I say well, we have to think of the whole scope, right? As much of the broad scope as we can. And so this moves us into, and this is the intro conversation, moves us into a big word, a big philosophical word called epistemology. Okay, let me intro this real quick because I don't want to spend a ton of time here, right? Because we can spend a ton of time here. We can literally write papers on this for days. Like, epistemology is regularly challenged and regularly, uh, I don't want to say fluid because that would sound poor, but like, anyway, we'll talk about it and you'll see why. Like the listener, the people who are here this morning, you'll see what I mean. So, Kyle, do you want to define what epistemology is?
In short, it's the study of how you can come to know something. It's the study of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I mean, it's big. It's the theory of knowledge, right? It's the uh, when people talk about epistemology, they're asking questions like, what is knowledge? How is knowledge acquired? How do people know what they know, right? And what we need to understand when it comes to epistemology is that, and philosophy for that matter, there are many areas of philosophy, but there are some main branches. We talk, like, there's metaphysics, which is like abstract philosophy, but they also have to do with uh, like the theory of God and like how to prove God, and that would be metaphysics. And we're going to take that and we're going to put that over here, right? That's an area, and all these are related to each other, right? It's the same tree, but it's here, right? There's the area of ethics and morals, right? This is like, these are fundamental and basic principles. I actually put these up at the beginning here. Boom, covering Kyle. Sorry. The ethics are like, when you say humans should, right? Or you should, like, this is ethics, right? Killing people is bad is an ethic and moral thing, right? Logic is the structure, right? We kind of talked about this, the structure by which you arrive at conclusions with good reasoning. And epistemology, and this is what we're talking about, that little green part here, is how do we know what we know? And I know this sounds like super tricky, and I want to try to break it down, at least in such a way where it can be effective for us to start having the conversation about. Kyle, you are also live, so you're like super leaning into the camera. I mean, that's okay. Like, you can, I know you're reading your phone. It's a-okay. But I just wanted to let you know. But epistemology is what we know, right? And this is important. There's 4 main areas of epistemology that tie into what you know, what Kyle knows, what Mike knows, what you, the listener, knows. Kyle, you wanna explain what knowledge is to us?
I actually watched a really good video on this recently that really summed it up nicely. It's knowledge is well, it's how you know something. But it rests upon 4 areas: belief, being convinced, truth, and basis. So you have to
Basis is also
like,
known as justification.
yes,
So,
yeah. In order to know something, you have to believe it. It has to be true. You have to be convinced of it, and you have to have a good basis or a good reason as to why you believe it. Right?
So let's be careful with this, because the big words that you said. Let's come back to this, right? This, what you were just saying, because we need to define belief, truth, and justification, and convinced. I say personally, for me, I say convinced rolls into belief. really easily.
Sure.
They're pretty interchangeable, but we can make that distinction. But first, uh, let's talk about truth. What is truth?
Truth is absolute. It's something. Man, it's hard to define without the word truth in it. I actually don't have a definition without the word truth in it. Now I think
It's
about it.
facts or reality, right?
Okay, yeah.
It is truth is unmoving. Truth
Yeah.
is truth. Truth is truth, regardless of what you feel or think about it, right? You
Sure.
can believe that truth doesn't exist. You can believe that, and we'll explain belief in just a second. But you can believe that something is a truth statement, and you can believe that it's not. But that doesn't change the quality of that truth, right? Like we hear phrases today of people speak your truth, right? Like those kinds of things. And as Christians, we are far more interested in speaking the truth rather than speaking my truth, right?
Because your truth really should, if it's actually truth, it should be everyone's truth.
It should be everyone's truth, right?
Yeah.
So like, for example, quarantine is hard, right? Quarantine is hard. That is a truth for Mike. Quarantine is hard because 3-year-olds trapped in a 2-bedroom apartment is hard, right? Well, that's like, okay, that's my truth, right? But that's not universal truth. Not everyone has a hyperactive 3-year-old. I mean, he'll be 3 in 2 weeks, or 10 days actually. He'll not everyone has a hyperactive 3-year-old that is fearless. Well, I tossed him up in the air last night, and he was terrified. And I was like, I don't understand. I used to throw you like literally 10 feet in the air, like no problem. But anyway, I tossed him up in the air last night. He was terrified, but he's fearless. Where I think we'll still go with that, and he's very active. If I say quarantine is hard because being trapped inside with a 3-year-old is hard in a small apartment is hard. That's not a universal truth, right? When we say truth, we're talking about universal things, right? A truth statement would be all people die. We can talk about Enoch later, but right, or in Jesus later, but right, like we can say a truth statement is unless intervened by God, all people die, right?
There you go.
So, so that's truth, right? Let's talk about belief. Kyle, what would you say is the definition of belief?
Belief is, once again, my mind wants to just go with something you believe.
Kyle,
Give me a second.
We've been through this. You've been through
My brain,
school, bro.
my brain's like sabotaging me right now. I can't help it. It's belief is, it's something that you come to understand and think true.
It's an
It's something.
attitude you hold towards something you believe to be true, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, what might be a belief what might be an example of a belief?
I mean, let's see. I guess without looking behind me right now, the wall behind me is white.
Okay.
Right.
Why is that a belief?
I can think that true because I've seen it before.
Okay.
So I have a hold an attitude that the wall is white. In theory, if I turn around, I'm not verifying that right now because I'm not looking at it, right?
Right. So a belief, and also we should say, you believe it's white you believe that the wall behind you is white because you haven't heard anyone come in the room and make any sounds like they're painting something, right?
Exactly.
Your door has remained closed, and you also believe that people can't walk through walls, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like these are things that lead you to your belief that the wall is still white, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that so we got truth, right? Truth is unmoving. Truth doesn't change, right? Uh, there, belief is something that you believe. We talked about this earlier, right? All rich people are corrupt. I believe this, right? People believe this. People believe that if you are rich, you are therefore corrupt. Uh, People believe that. Belief doesn't have to be filled with truth by its
Yeah.
nature, right? Belief can be irrational.
Yeah.
Heights are scary, right? Well, heights aren't scary. You're scared of the belief is heights are scary, but the truth is that heights are scary because of the death that happens if you fall from a height,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the truth behind the belief that heights are scary.
Belief doesn't have to be rooted in truth.
Right. That's a scary thing, right? Because people will arrive at beliefs, which is this is a very core part of people, right? This is a very core thing to people is that they hold to beliefs. God isn't real. Okay, well, what's the truth behind that, right? Like, let's talk about this because that's an irrational belief. Okay, another Mustangs are the best car, right? I mean, someone could believe that. Yellow is the best color. Oftentimes, when it comes to beliefs, this is the what's interesting about beliefs, and this is something that we should touch on and we should recognize, is that this is belief is often what people operate and how they live their lives is based off their beliefs, not usually the truth or justification or good conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes people operate their lives based off their beliefs. Would you agree with that? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I would say that a lot of people's actions and the way that they go about their life, the way they perceive life, is heavily influenced by beliefs.
Right. So again, if I believe I'm going to die from a shark attack by going in the ocean, right? My action is I don't go in the ocean,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Now, is that belief justified? And this leads to the next term, right? The other big term when it comes to epistemology is justification, because
Yeah.
what does it take to justify a belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Justification, and I'll take this one. Um, it's a belief, right? Like a belief is justified, a truth is justified when you apply good reasoning and logic to it, right? Uh, Loosely speaking, okay, and this is just from one of the resource websites that I used. Loosely speaking, justification is the reason that someone holds to a rationally admissible belief on the assumption that it has a good reason for holding to it. So, justification is often tied to apologetics. Justification is often tied to uh, the reason why we believe something. Kyle, you're gonna get distracted by the stream chat. But anyway, justification is tied to, or should be tied to, what we believe, right? So this is the area where people argue the most. This is also the area where people use really bad logic for their epistemology, right? This is the area that is so often exposed by so often exposed in conspiracy theories. People believe a lot of crazy stuff, right? Like there are people who believe all sorts of crazy things. Kyle, what's one of the craziest things that you've heard that someone actually believes in that isn't hyper controversial?
That is hyper
That
controversial.
is not hyper controversial.
Oh, okay. I mean,
I mean, it could be
um,
semi controversial, but like I don't want to get completely thrown off track with this.
I mean, that the 1918 pandemic was manufactured, and the coronavirus is also manufactured.
Okay, so birds aren't real, says chat.
Yes.
So here's the thing. So these are like conspiracy theories, right? Like these are theories that people come up. But the thing is they haven't applied good logic and good reason oftentimes to a lot of these things, right? The chat's now like, it's true, birds aren't real. It's hilarious. But anyway,
Such a
justification is really important, and that's why we talked about logic and reason. Because logic and reason, logic allows us to arrive at the truth. Reason allows us to arrive at belief. Obviously, this is broad, with broad brushstrokes, right? Again, like I said at the top, this is just an intro, and this is just to get people thinking. But when we start thinking about the justification, that for what we hold true, or like what we believe to be true, justification is the area by which we test it and by which we reason it. This is where people get really sensitive, because oftentimes if someone believes something, right? COVID, if someone was to say we shouldn't be afraid of COVID because 98 or 99.95% of people haven't gotten it yet, or haven't died from it yet. Okay, I think that's the number that people are throwing around. 0.05% of people or Americans have died from COVID, or again something like that. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. People can believe that COVID isn't a threat, or that COVID is a threat. Where the arguments happen is in the justification of that. There are truth statements that we can make regarding COVID, right? Regarding national health and public health. The justification good justification is how we should move forward to what we believe and how we act. So epistemology, backing up for 1 second, epistemology is what we know and the combination of all of these things, right? So we should be, as Christians, we should be well reasoned. We should know the truth, be able to believe the truth, and be able to walk through our justification of why we believe the truth. Does that make sense? So, what are your thoughts on this, Kyle?
I actually like how you put that. In order to know something, it has to be true. You have to believe it. It has to be true, and it has to be justifiable, right?
Right.
Like if it's true and you believe it, but it's not justifiable, then you actually don't know it, right? Like, so I like how you put that. But,
So let's start let's start moving this into some application. And also, chat, if you guys have any questions about these things, like I would love to be able to expand on them a little bit more if needed. So please engage with us, and we can talk about it a little bit more. But oh, what were you gonna say something?
No, go on. I was just thinking.
Okay, so why is this important? Why is it important to talk about logic, reason, epistemology, and what we know, and having what we can know as truth and how we can justify beliefs? Well, the reason for this is because the Bible says things like love your neighbor, right? What the Bible doesn't say is, well, I shouldn't say doesn't say. What the Bible, oh, I'll say doesn't say. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I have to gather my thoughts here. What the Bible doesn't say is explicitly say. There we go. Is how to love your neighbor during race riots on the last weekend of May in 2020. Right? Like, it doesn't say when your parents ground you for your sneaking out of the house or not doing your homework, this is what you should do. Right? What the Bible doesn't say these things, right? So what ends up happening is, and what's in our hearts is inherently people, and this, I'm gonna make a claim, a premise that I could back logically, but to move forward we have to go. But inherently people are lazy thinkers, I should say.
Yeah, it falls under the umbrella of lazy.
Right. But
yeah.
Inherently people want to move, and especially American people want to move to a place of comfort. Okay? So what happens is we often don't like to be challenged in our beliefs. We often don't like justification. So we start pushing back, right? We start pushing back, and we start trying to explain things in the most comfortable way possible. Like, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, not only do we try to explain things in the most comfortable way possible, but we will go to beliefs that are most comfortable to us.
Right. And that's important to recognize is, like, our brains, and I am not, I should say this, I'm not a psychologist, but I've studied psychology. And one of the things that I've studied psychology in many settings, I should say. But one of the things that's pretty universally true is that people move towards comfort, or move towards not living in a place where their beliefs are unjustified. They want to justify their beliefs, whether logically or with good reason, but we move to, as individuals, to a place of justifying our beliefs carefully, right? Someone goes through a bad breakup, right? Well, I made mistakes. They made mistakes too. I am going to process through all that stuff in such a way that is more comfortable for my brain to process the bad breakup. Does that make sense? So we naturally move towards this. We naturally move towards more comfortable stuff. The problem is to be reasonable, to be logical, to think well takes training and practice, and a lot of people don't engage in that training and practice. So what ends up happening is that people end up camping out in their areas of comfort and only operating from that place. Why would you say, Kyle, is that dangerous?
If you're never actually if you've never learned how to think logically, how to apply good logic to a situation, it's dangerous. It's really dangerous to just get comfortable with where you are and sit there, because number one, you'll come to all kinds. You can really, and it's not guaranteed you'll come to bad conclusions, but it's really likely that you will. And it makes it really easy to come to very terrible conclusions. But not only that, you might often think yourself an expert on things that you have no understanding of.
Right. Especially because if we start with bad premises, right? And this is where we have to start with good logic and good premises. If I believe that all rich people are corrupt, well then it's a bad premise to start with, and that can lead to some pretty messed up beliefs, right? That can
Yes.
lead to every single politician is
Is
involved
corrupt.
in heinous acts with children, right?
Yeah.
Or that, and then if you can start going down that rabbit trail. The farther you are as a politician, right? The longer you've been a politician, the more open you are to accepting your corruption. So, the savior of politics are the people who are not politicians by trade, right? Like, I hope by having this conversation, people can start understanding and just seeing how quick and easy it is to jump to certain conclusions, right? And to start reasoning poorly. I I want to bring up a subject that is going to be touchy, and I'm not going to talk about it in full depths of the conversation, but it's something that I think is really applicable today, and I hope for our listeners that this is helpful. Um, Canon Hinnant.
What?
Canon Hinnant is a 5-year-old boy
Oh.
from North Carolina who last week, or in this last week, was shot and killed by his neighbor while he was outside riding a bike in his lawn. Man, I didn't think I'd get choked up at that. Like, sorry, just a second. It's heinous what happened. It is absurd. It is gross. It is an example of sin that someone would take the life of someone in that nature, and that someone would take the life of someone who is so young in that nature. It hurts. I hurt and I mourn for this. There are people who are weaponizing this. Those people are saying, wait a second, a little white boy was killed by a black man in a heinous way. They are saying, we can all agree that that is heinous. And everyone is saying, yeah, right? And I said that with too much excitement. They're like, yeah, like, It's gross. It's terrible. It's not good. And to that, I completely agree. Where I disagree is where people start taking that and weaponizing it. There are people who are coming out and saying, wait a second, this kid was killed. This young kid, the 5-year-old, was killed by someone who is a different race than him. Why are there not riots in the streets? And this comes back to beliefs and justified beliefs. Because what people are appealing to is, when they say something like that, is what they're appealing to is they're saying, hey, there should be equal treatment. And I believe that what happened with all the riots with George Floyd in response to George Floyd's death, interracial, look, it's all the same. It looks all the same. I believe we should have, I'm going to call people out for their dissonance on this, because this is what I believe. The problem is they're unjustified in that belief. Because the riots, and I want you to, like, please speak up at any point. I don't want to just be monologuing. But the thing is the riots that happened in response to George Floyd, weren't about one man getting killed, a black man getting killed by white cops. And that's where people who are saying, why aren't we freaking out about, or where's the our outrage, uproar, there we go, about Canon Hinnant, is they're believing something that is different and separate from what the truth was.
Yeah. I mean, their understanding of what caused the protest in the first place is that they think it was simply that a black man was killed by a white cop, when in reality that's not what the protests were about. But because they believe that, they then see a white kid killed by a black man and think and equate the two and say, well, then there should be protests and riots as well.
Right, because equality, right, or
Yeah.
etc. You go down this road.
Yeah.
We should call all sin, and we should call all death of people. I'll be careful of should statements here, but the death of the innocent is incredibly heinous. I mourn, like, I cannot imagine, like, my 3-year-old being 2 years from getting killed. Right, like, I'm imagining how my life would look like, and, like, my wife's crying in the other room right now. Like it's just, it would be insane to me, and it would be hard. The difference here, and what we have to be careful of, is justified beliefs, because in justified beliefs, we can miss the truth. The truth is that the very reason why riots happen is because of the differences in how justice was applied. The person who shot Canon Hinnant is already jailed, already in custody. The people who shot Breonna Taylor while she was sleeping in her bed are not in custody. The people who swore to protect and serve people knelt on George Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes while he was dying. We need to be careful when we're navigating things, when we're navigating our culture, that we don't confound things. Another big one that I've seen recently amongst Christian circles is sex trafficking, specifically sex trafficking of children. Again, heinous, absolutely heinous. Man, I'm like getting angry thinking about it, and I need to submit that to the Lord. We need to be careful about wrapping up all sorts of conspiracy theory and poorly justified beliefs with the true heinous thing is that people are being bought and sold today. Specifically, people are being bought and sold for sex today. We need to, truth. Truth statement. God, well, truth statement, that shouldn't happen. We'll put it this way. I'll jump to the conclusions for time. If we need to walk through biblically, if anyone listening needs to walk through biblically as to why this is particularly heinous, we can talk. But anyway, we need to be careful about combining the heinous truth with bad beliefs. What I mean is the heinous truth of people being bought and sold. The heinous truth of the justice system not being equally applied. Those are heinous truths. Be careful with how we live out beliefs beyond that. Because here's what we also need to know is Jesus came and died for all. Jesus came and died for even the people who are committing those heinous crimes. Now, does that mean forgiveness involves no consequences? No. But we know that if people are truly following God, that they will value human life. That we wouldn't even be in the situation where a man was suspected of robbery and was chased and gunned down in Ahmaud Arbery. If we wouldn't be getting up in arms about things if we valued life like God values his creation. I've talked for a long time. Kyle, I'm sure I've stirred up some thoughts. Before as we bring this plane down for landing and this conversation on logic and reasoning and reasoned beliefs and epistemology and what we know and those types of things, why is this important to you? And as it applies to navigating the world around us biblically as sons of God.
I mean, for the reasons, for the last three examples you gave, really, or specifically the last two, it's really important because you'll have people who go and completely misunderstand an argument and misunderstand the reason people are upset about something, and then go and try to take away the legitimacy of their anger and their frustration by pointing out some supposed hypocrisy in their argument when there isn't any to be found, but rather the people who are pointing out the hypocrisy just don't understand because they haven't taken the time. They haven't actually come to a good conclusion on anything because they haven't really applied any good logic to it. They've just kind of come in with, I believe this and this is what I'm standing on. And similarly with the, the human trafficking issue, it's the same thing, right? People are pushing their own beliefs and agenda, and in the like disguise of humanitarianism, or in the disguise of saying, here's this heinous act, and here's the people who are perpetrating it, or so I believe, without any justification, right?
Right, and there's a false application of logic too, because people say that's a heinous act. This is also a heinous act. We need to respond the same,
Exactly.
right? Why aren't there riots about sex trafficking?
Yeah.
Right? Like
Exactly.
there's these poor applications of logic.
Exactly. And that's like, this is why it's important to have good logic, to have to have good application of reason, to have an understanding of epistemology, and understand that to know something doesn't mean to just believe it, but it has to be true, and it has to be justifiable. Um, Otherwise, you're going to come to these conclusions. You're going to start doing these things that actually take away from the conversation and take away from the movements rather than help anything at all.
So to wrap it up, um, how would how would you encourage um, how would you encourage someone who's navigating and maybe being challenged with this conversation?
Um, First, I would say is honestly try to study and learn what logic and reason is, and what epistemology is. Specifically, I would start with logic, um, and try to understand how what you try to understand what you believe and how you came to those beliefs, and try to logically justify them. Um, really test yourself.
And I
Um,
and I, I want to be really clear. Um, there's a lot of things when it comes to this, and as Christians, like I've really had to test my beliefs at multiple times in my life, and I've arrived at the conclusion that Christianity is right, right? Like,
you,
and so
yeah,
and,
Paul
for
tells you
for
that your
for a
beliefs.
whole bunch of reasons, right?
Yeah,
But like that, like aren't even just conviction, but are like just like laws of logic type of things, right?
yeah,
There's absolute
yeah,
reasons to uh, that point to God, right?
yeah.
So like I want that to be clear, right? So when you're testing your beliefs, I want the listener to know that like even test what you believe about God,
Yes.
because I mean I'm thoroughly convinced, Kyle's thoroughly convinced, great thinkers are thoroughly convinced that, I mean, I'll say this, that, or I'm sorry, all truth points to God, right? There's a headline that I saw that was ironic recently. Is like, um, scientists at the peak of their game are leaving science for faith, and it's like it's like, wait, so as you pursue truth, you're arriving at God, right? And it's like, huh, interesting.
Hmm.
There might be something to that. So, as you're testing what you're believing, right, and you're applying logic to it, again, I'm not saying become an atheist for 3 weeks while you test your faith. No, like, but like truly test what you believe.
You don't have to suspend your beliefs in order to test them.
That's a great way to put it. I love that, Kyle.
Thank you.
Um, any other like pieces of encouragement?
Um, Talk to people about it. Talk to people, especially who have worked through this before. Mike and I have both worked through our faiths and what we believe logically. But there's a lot of people who have worked through this as well. So try to talk to people about it, get the conversation going, because that'll help to encourage you, and see that it's not like some fringe belief of like only a handful of people believe in logic.
Right. I have uh, a couple pieces of encouragement. The first one is be comfortable being uncomfortable, and what I mean is um, it's you don't have to arrive at a conclusion the first like within 15 minutes of googling something, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
have to like what I say is, you know, uh it's uncomfortable to move a belief from here to here, right? And to work through that justification can and like there's going to be areas where you have to be like, man, I realize I was wrong here, right? I realized I was appealing to the authority of the government rather than the authority of God, right? Like there are, so be comfortable being uncomfortable and realizing kind of these uncomfortable truths about what you believe. The second thing is that people, well, do you have anything to say on that last one?
I mean, to put it in another way, like be comfortable being uncomfortable, or be uncomfortable when you're like to be comfortable.
When you're comfortable, be
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, don't let falling into habit and like what you currently have and saying this is good. Don't let that be comfortable. Like
um,
constantly test and move forward.
right. The other area, or the next thing is I want to remind people to love their neighbor, right? And what I mean is that if people have poorly justified beliefs, right? If people have poor understanding of truth, that doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean that, you know, they're some sort of sinner that needs to be eradicated, you know, or whatever. Um, what that means is that there are opportunities to grow, and the number one way that you can pray, I'm sorry, the number one way that you can help someone grow is to pray for them. You don't need to like sit down. You may be called to do this, but what you don't want to do is walk around at like a crusader, you know, like a paladin, to refer to D&D last week, and be like, I need to tell you why you're wrong, and you need to believe what I believe, right? Like, don't
It can
do
be
that.
very helpful.
That will be very unhelpful. That will turn people off. That will push people away. Um, people people won't. I heard this phrase once, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but I'm going to quote it for the sake of here. But uh, people won't listen to you unless they believe you care about them. That is like that is far more profound the more you think about it, right? Because we do that too, right? Like we do that with like people bringing atheistic beliefs, right? And like logic and reason, right? Like I'm not going to listen to you because I just don't trust you. I don't think that you're worthy of being listened to. You know, and it's like, "Oh, okay." Right? Like I don't like we do this, it's all across the spectrum. But people won't listen to you unless they believe you care about them. And that's really really important. Um so back to the main point of being like love one another, show grace, pray for them. Point Make sure your life points to the gospel and points to truth and justified truth. That you believe things that are thought out. That when you are confronted with your beliefs, that you are able to uh, respond well and respond with love. Because there's a lot of folks who there are a lot of folks who even won't listen to you, even if you're speaking truth. There's a lot of folks who will not listen to you because of what you believe. You can't just force your beliefs over top of that. Show them that you love them and that you're worthy of that, not worthy, but that you are worth listening to. So kind of the three things were no truth, right? Logically no truth. Test what you believe. test those things. The second point was to be uncomfortable and to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And when you're comfortable, you shouldn't be comfortable. You should be uncomfortable that you're comfortable. The third is pray for people. And when you see someone who's practicing something that is different, that maybe isn't well reasoned, that isn't well thought out, that isn't, these different things, pray for them. And if you have the opportunity to speak it out of love. So, logic, reason, and epistemology. These are important things. These are topics of conversation. These are things that I will gladly speak in depth with anyone who's listening about. They get real funky, real fast. But these are tools. And when I say funky, I mean they get complex really fast.
Yeah.
But these are tools to help us navigate. These are tools that God has given us to help us navigate the world we live in. Because there's a lot that's thrown out at us right now. Again, Canon Hinnon just wrecks my heartstrings. It also wrecks my heartstrings that there are family members of Breonna Taylor who are hurting. We need to be careful about what we see, the memes on the internet, the conspiracy theories that are thrown out there, the appeals to authority that we are appealing to. We need to be thinking well. We need to be reasoned well. We need to believe well. I think that's it. Waypoint Coffee Corner. Kyle, you got anything else?
That's it.
If you guys want to reach out to us, you can reach out at any of our socials. I actually didn't do this because today was a little bit different. You follow us on Instagram. Hit the like button on Twitch. That's that little heart that's right there. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. You can reach out to us. Email us. If you have questions, we will gladly engage with this. Again, if you want to reach out to myself or to Kyle, you could just message us on Instagram. It might as well be texting. And if not, we'll just block you. So, whatever. Yeah, this is the conversation. Logic, reason, epistemology. Let's use this to glorify the Lord. So that is it for Waypoint Coffee Corner this morning. You all have a great day. Bye.
Later.